Before we begin, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, liking our content, and sharing it with others. Wherever you are viewing from, we would appreciate your feedback in the comments. Growing up, I lived with my mother. My father, a member of the armed forces, was often away on duty. His work required him to travel frequently, so I did not see him often. My mother took on the roles of both parents, ensuring our home was comfortable, peaceful, and loving. She was incredibly kind and caring, and she put immense effort into making our home a pleasant place. Before we proceed, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, liking our content, and sharing it with others. Growing up, I lived with my mother. My father, a soldier, was frequently away on duty, and as a result, I seldom saw him. My mother took on the role of both parents, ensuring our home was always comfortable, peaceful, and loving. She was incredibly kind and caring, putting immense effort into keeping everything in order. Every detail mattered to her. She wanted to create a warm environment, and I could feel the love in every corner of our home. From time to time, my uncle would come by to visit us. He was my mother's brother, and he always felt like a natural extension of our family. His visits brought laughter and joy. He was gentle and humorous, always arriving with small gifts that made me smile and feel special. He had a way of making everything seem light. She was meticulous in her approach, ensuring that every aspect of our home was well managed. Her attention to detail was evident in her commitment to creating a warm and inviting environment. I could always sense the love that she put into our home. On occasion, my uncle would visit us. He was my mother's brother, and he naturally fit into our family. His visits were a source of joy and laughter. He was gentle and humorous, and he always brought small gifts that made me smile and feel special. He had a way of making everything seem light-hearted and fun, effortlessly brightening our home. I felt like I could trust him completely. After all, he was family, someone I looked up to as a caring and supportive figure in my life. Now, at the age of 20, I am a university student living what I thought was a relatively typical life. I have my studies, my family, and things generally feel. My life felt steady and predictable, and I was content with it. However, I was not prepared for the events that were about to unfold. One day, after a particularly demanding class, I returned home feeling exhausted. I had a period, and my body felt heavy and tired. I was feeling physically unwell and emotionally overwhelmed. I had not expected to receive any visitors, but upon arriving home, I found my uncle. His presence was comforting. He was someone I trusted, someone who had been present throughout my life, making every visit feel I was in need of a rest. It was a day marked by physical discomfort and emotional sensitivity. I wasn't expecting any visitors, but upon my arrival, I found my uncle present. His presence was comforting. He was someone I trusted, someone who had been present throughout my life, making every visit feel familiar and warm. When he offered to assist me with some of my coursework, I didn't hesitate. I thought it was kind of him. He sat down beside me on the couch, close enough that I could catch the scent of his cologne, a familiar fragrance that instilled a sense of safety. Everything felt normal, just like any other day. I felt reassured when he offered to help with some of my coursework. Sitting down on the couch next to me, he was close enough that I could detect the scent of his cologne. It was a familiar fragrance that instilled a sense of safety. The visit felt normal, just like any other. During the visit, we talked for a bit and he asked about my studies and how I was finding life at the university. I shared my experiences, grateful for his interest in my life. He seemed genuinely engaged, asking questions about my classes and how I was managing everything. However, as the conversation continued, I felt the tiredness growing. My body needed rest, and my mind was beginning to drift. Eventually, I turned to him and said I needed to go lie down for a bit. He gave me a warm smile, nodded understandingly, and told me to go get some rest. His response was nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would make me feel any different than I usually do. I proceeded to my room with a sense of reassurance, having received kind attention from my uncle. I was eager to unwind and recuperate from the day's events. However, I was unaware that my uncle had a different plan in mind. Upon entering my room, I reflected on the fortunate circumstances that allowed me to have such a supportive family. My mother was consistently present for me, and my uncle was always attentive. I proceeded to my room with a sense of relief, eager to unwind and recuperate from the day's events. However, I soon discovered that my uncle had devised a secret plan. Upon entering my room, I reflected on the fortunate circumstances that had led to my presence there. My mother was consistently present to offer support, and my uncle consistently demonstrated kindness towards me. Despite these reassuring circumstances, I sensed a slight anomaly that day. I struggled to identify the source of this feeling, attributing it to mere fatigue. I opted to change into my comfortable attire and seated myself on my bed, hoping to find some rest. My mind drifted back to the conversation I had had with my uncle. He had asked more questions than usual. At first, I thought he was just being friendly, but now, as I lay there, I started to wonder why he seemed so interested in everything I did. He was on my period, and it felt like my body was acting differently than usual. Sometimes, it made me feel restless, and my thoughts would drift in strange directions. It was as if my body had its own ideas about what it wanted, especially during those days of the month. I often felt a strange mix of emotions and didn't quite know how to handle them. Back then, during my time in boarding school, life got a lot more complicated. Being surrounded by so many other girls meant I was consistently exposed to novel concepts and experiences. It appeared as though there was an unending flow of dialogue concerning a wide range of subjects, including our menstrual cycles. My acquaintances discussed this topic with such transparency, as if it were a typical aspect of life. As they shared their personal insights and experiences, they rendered the subject seemingly ordinary. I was exposed to a wide range of perspectives on this subject, including discussions about menstruation. My friends discussed it openly, sharing personal tips and experiences that made it seem effortless. In the dormitory, surrounded by laughter and animated expressions, I found myself intrigued by the discussions. They shared their thoughts about their periods, exchanging stories about how they handled cravings and mood swings. I was intrigued by the ease with which they discussed their experiences. They shared anecdotes about their strategies for managing cravings and mood swings during that time. One of them mentioned a method they referred to as doodle that enabled them to satisfy themselves in a particular way. She asserted that this approach eliminated the need for a male partner. Her assertion was met with approval, and the others expressed their agreement. I observed as they continued to discuss the matter openly, elaborating on their experiences. One of them mentioned a method that they referred to as doodle that assisted them in meeting their own needs. They spoke with enthusiasm about how they had learned to rely on themselves to satisfy their own desires. They shared intimate details about their experiences without any sense of embarrassment or discomfort. Instead, they spoke with a sense of confidence and pride, and it was clear that they found the topic to be empowering. Her eyes were sparkling with excitement. It's like a little adventure you can have whenever you want. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself listening even more intently as they described the ways they explored their own bodies and learned what made them feel good. They spoke about it like it was a natural, even fun part. It was a revelation that every woman should discover for herself. Initially, I felt a bit shy and hesitant, unsure if I could relate to what they were describing. It seemed like such a bold thing to do, something I'd never really thought about in such a way. However, as the conversation unfolded and I saw how much they valued their self-discovery is essential for well-being, I was intrigued by their experiences and wanted to understand the significance they placed on it. They discussed the use of touch, particularly with their hands or specific objects, to achieve calm and relaxation, especially in moments of overwhelm or intense emotions. It was as if they were unveiling a hidden path to a world where they could find solace and contentment according to their own standards. Each narrative I heard broadened my perspective, demonstrating that self-discovery is crucial for emotional well-being. I began to understand that taking care of our own bodies is an essential part of feeling strong and empowered. They spoke with a level of self-assurance that made me see this part of life as a powerful and personal experience. The idea that we didn't need anyone else, let alone a man, to feel satisfied and fulfilled felt so liberating. For the first time, I began to see how I could explore my own emotions and desires. Understanding myself in a new light, I realized that there was so much more to learn. There was so much more about myself waiting to be discovered. These conversations inspired me to reflect on my own journey and consider how I could take that first step towards identifying what makes me feel good, confident, and completely myself. I realized that I wanted to embrace that same freedom. It was all about discovering myself and finding comfort in my own skin. As I listened to their laughter and stories, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling inside me. I knew I had a lot to learn, but I was ready to explore my own path, just like my friends had done. One day after school, I decided to ask one of my friends about it. "What's doodle?" I whispered, feeling nervous but curious. She smiled and explained that it was a way some girls found comfort during their periods. She told me how it could help with those strange feelings that sometimes came out of nowhere. I listened intently, intrigued by her words. My friend encouraged me to try it if I ever felt curious or there is a great deal to learn, but I was prepared to chart my own course, just as my friends had done. One day after school, I decided to inquire about the matter with one of my acquaintances. "What is the doodle?" I whispered, feeling nervous but intrigued. She smiled and explained that it was a method some girls found soothing during their menstrual cycles. She described how it could alleviate the unexpected discomfort that sometimes arises. I listened attentively, fascinated by her words. My friend encouraged me to try it if I ever felt curious or. "It's just for you," she said. "You can explore your body and discover what feels good." I wasn't sure if I was prepared for that, but I was curious to understand the concept. It lingered in my mind like a mystery waiting to be solved. When I was in school, I finally decided to try the doodle. I was both nervous and excited, not really knowing what to expect. I remembered all the conversations I had with my friend, and how they described the pleasure it could bring. So one afternoon, when I recently had a moment to reflect on my own well-being and decided to try a new approach. The experience was surprisingly natural and comforting, providing an overwhelming sense of ease and relaxation. It was as if a weight had been lifted, leaving me feeling refreshed and stress-free. This newfound sense of well-being was both unexpected and deeply satisfying, offering a unique and liberating experience. This was a part of myself that I had never truly explored. Now that I had, I realized it was something valuable, something I could cherish and revisit whenever I needed. From that moment on, using the doodle became my own private ritual, a little secret that I carried close to my heart. Even after I left home and moved to university, the comfort it brought stayed with me. I found solace in knowing I had a way to bring myself peace whenever I felt the familiar discomforts of my period approaching. This was a part of myself that I had never truly explored. Now that I had, I realized it was something valuable that I could cherish and revisit whenever I needed. From that moment on, using the doodle became my own private ritual, a little secret that I carried close to my heart. Even after I left home and moved to university, the comfort it brought stayed with me. I found solace in knowing I had a way to bring myself peace whenever I felt the familiar discomforts of my period approaching. It wasn't just about relief, it was a part of my routine, a way of caring for myself and giving myself something to look forward to during those challenging days. Now, as I found myself experiencing my period once again, I was determined to embrace that familiar comfort. I recalled the times in the past when it had brought me such joy and peace, and I was eager to relive those moments. I found a quiet moment in my dorm room, carefully ensuring I had complete privacy, and began to prepare myself mentally and physically for the experience. My heart raced in anticipation, my body tingling as I settled in. I felt a sense of anticipation and warmth envelop me. I closed my eyes, allowing my mind to drift back to the sensations I had felt before, and I fully immersed myself in the moment. This was my opportunity to unwind. I was able to release tension and experience pleasure in a way that was uniquely my own. I explored every sensation, fully savoring the freedom and joy of the moment. It was a space I had created just for myself, a time to embrace the pleasure that was all mine, free from judgment or expectation. I embarked on a journey of self-discovery through personal exploration, discovering new aspects of myself with each endeavor. This approach offered a sense of freedom unlike anything I had previously experienced. Since adopting this practice, I have come to realize that my personal fulfillment does not hinge on romantic relationships. Initially, I questioned the merits of prioritizing my own pleasure, especially in contrast to the experiences of my friends who were engaged in dating or discussing their romantic interests. Their light-hearted banter about certain activities requiring a romantic partner did not resonate with me. I felt confident in my ability to direct my own happiness, though I acknowledged the presence of external influences. There have been moments when I have questioned whether I was missing out on something by not having a romantic partner. I observed my friends sharing intimate moments with their significant others, and I considered how pleasant that kind of connection could be. However, I then recollected the joy I felt during my personal moments. I realized that I was perfectly content without a boyfriend for the time being. This was my opportunity to discover who I was and what made me feel good. I was learning to love myself, and that felt like a powerful thing. I enjoyed these moments alone, and they brought me a sense of comfort and peace. I knew that my journey of self-discovery was ongoing. The initial phase of the discovery process was underway, and I was eager to delve deeper into self-discovery without being influenced by external opinions. After achieving a state of deep relaxation, I reclined on my bed, experiencing a profound sense of contentment, accompanied by a gentle smile. As I surrendered to the softness of the mattress, I savored the serenity that ensued after a demanding day at university. My eyes closed as the quiet of the room enveloped me, providing a sense of comfort. I felt at peace, as if the weight of the day had finally been lifted. If you have found this video helpful, please leave a comment to let me know. Suddenly, a soft knock broke the silence, jolting me back to full awareness. Startled, I quickly sat up, my heart beginning to race as I tried to make sense of the unexpected sound. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting any visitors, and it seemed. It was peculiar that anyone would visit so late. I remained seated, attuned to my surroundings, hoping to discern any potential disturbance. The second knock, more pronounced than the first, prompted me to rise and respond. I proceeded to the door, my curiosity piqued, and opened it to find my uncles standing before me. Their gaze met mine, and I perceived an enigmatic quality in their eyes that I had never noticed before. It was peculiar that anyone would visit so late. I sat still, listening closely, hoping that it had been a figment of my imagination. Then the knock came again, this time more pronounced but still gentle, urging me to get up and answer. Curious and uneasy, I stood up, made my way to the door, and opened it. To my surprise, it was my uncle standing there, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was something strange in his eyes, something I'd never noticed before. A faint chill ran down my spine, and an uneasy feeling settled over me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that everything was probably fine, just as it always had been. I forced my voice to sound casual as I asked, "Are you okay?" However, my heart betrayed my calm tone, beating faster with each passing second. I studied his face, searching for a hint of why he was there so late or what might have prompted this unusual visit. But as I looked into his eyes, that unsettling feeling only grew. I felt a sense of unease, and my voice reflected this sentiment as I inquired about his well-being. However, my heart was racing, and I felt a growing sense of discomfort. I observed his face, attempting to discern the reason for his visit, but his gaze felt unnerving. There was something in his eyes that made me feel uneasy. I heard a quiet alarm sounding in the back of my mind. He glanced around the room, as if searching for something. "I'm fine," he replied, though his voice sounded a bit too casual for my comfort. He moved closer, and I felt a flutter of anxiety. I shifted on my bed, trying to maintain a light conversation despite the increasing tension in the air. "What brings you here?" I asked, I inquired, attempting to maintain a friendly tone despite the mounting tension. "What brings you here?" He replied, his gaze fixed on me, intently studying me in a manner that differed from the typical uncle-niece relationship. "I just wanted to check on you," he said slowly, his voice low. "I haven't seen you in a while." There's something unsettling about the way he spoke. It felt too serious, too intense, for a simple visit. I wanted to dismiss it, to believe he was just being a caring uncle, but my instincts told me otherwise. I attempted to smile in an effort to ease the tension between us. "I'm fine, really. Just relaxing," I replied, attempting to sound cheerful, but deep down I felt a strange mixture of confusion and unease. Why was he here now? What was that look on his face? My mind filled with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a shift in his demeanor, an intensity in his gaze that I hadn't seen before. It felt as though I interpreted his silence as a sign of something I was not prepared to understand, which made me instinctively wary. His gaze fixed on me, and I perceived a peculiar energy in his eyes, as if he was contemplating moving closer, perhaps even joining me on the bed. He experienced a sense of unease, and my pulse quickened. The way he was looking at me was not like the familiar, reassuring glance of a family member. It was different, and it unsettled me. It felt as though he was trying to communicate something. I could not decipher his communication, and it made me uneasy. I told myself it was nothing, but I knew it was not normal. The tension in the air was palpable. I tried to break the silence, asking a question: "Is there something you want to talk about?" Despite my efforts to maintain composure, I felt somewhat anxious. I attempted to redirect the conversation to a more neutral topic in the hope that it would alleviate the discomfort. He showed signs of hesitation, as if grappling with something unspoken. His expression shifted between the familiar warmth of an uncle and a more ominous tone, which only added to my unease. He simply said, "I just wanted to see how you were doing," but the words felt loaded with underlying meaning. I struggled to understand the full extent of his emotions. Despite my efforts to maintain composure, I found myself slightly unsteady. I attempted to redirect the conversation to a more neutral topic in the hope that it would alleviate the discomfort. However, he hesitated, as if grappling with something unspoken. His expression shifted between the familiar warmth of an uncle and something more ominous, which only heightened my unease. He simply replied, "I'm well," but his response felt loaded with significance. Another surge of anxiety washed over me, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I forced myself to maintain eye contact. I wanted to tell him that the way he was looking at me made me uncomfortable. I valued the professional boundaries between us and didn't want them blurred yet. The words felt stuck, trapped somewhere between my heart and my lips. Instead, I fidgeted with the edge of my blanket, trying to regain my composure. I thought back to all the times my uncle had been kind. I felt another surge of anxiety as I looked into his eyes. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I forced myself to maintain eye contact. I wanted to tell him that his gaze made me uncomfortable. I valued the professional boundaries between us and didn't want them blurred. However, I couldn't find the words. Instead, I fidgeted with the edge of my blanket, trying to regain my composure. I thought back to all the times my uncle had been kind and supportive. It was difficult to reconcile that person with the one standing before me now. "I'm fine, really. I'm just studying and relaxing," I repeated, hoping to push away the growing unease. However, even as I spoke, I could see the glimmer of something in his eyes. It was a hint of an unspoken desire that made me want to retreat further into myself. I wished I could just close the door again, create some distance, and remind myself that I was safe in my own space. Before I knew it, he stepped closer too. I was taken aback when he suggested that we spend time together. The words hung in the air, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I wanted to back away to create some space between us, but my body felt frozen in place as he moved closer. I struggled to breathe. I was caught off guard, and before I could respond, he leaned in and pressed his lips against my chest. I felt a chill run through me, and I felt a rush of confusion and fear. This wasn't the kind of fun I had imagined, and I realized that I found myself in an unfavorable situation. I attempted to maintain my composure and inquired about his actions with a gentle push. My voice was slightly trembling as I expressed my emotions, which included anger, fear, and a sense of betrayal. This was not the expected behavior for our family. I had always trusted him, and now that trust appeared to be broken. His expression changed in a way I had not previously observed, and for a moment, an unfamiliar expression flickered on his face, possibly indicating surprise. He took another step forward and, in a casual tone that was out of place, said, "Come on, don't be like that." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, as he tried once more to close the distance between us. It was as though he thought he could dismiss my no, as if my hesitation was just a minor inconvenience. At that moment, my heart began to race faster, a surge of adrenaline mixed with anxiety flooding over me. He took another step forward and said, "Come on, don't be like that." The words were casually delivered, but the implications were significant. He attempted to close the distance between us. It appeared that he thought my hesitation was minor. At that moment, my heart began to race, and I felt a surge of adrenaline and anxiety. I realized that I had to assert my boundaries. I couldn't let the situation escalate. My voice shook, but I spoke firmly. "This isn't right," I said, meeting his gaze despite the tremor in my voice. "You can't do this. You're my uncle." The gravity of the situation was overwhelming. I summoned every ounce of strength and determination I had, and I saw his demeanor shift slightly. The impact of my words seemed to reach him, if only for a moment. Sensing the need for space, I instinctively took a step back, feeling the reassuring solidity of the wall behind me. It was as if the wall itself lent me strength, grounding me and reminding me that I had every right to hold my ground. If you are still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, please leave a comment to let me know. I had no idea that I possessed this level of protection. I was determined not to allow him to manipulate or take advantage of me, regardless of his attempts to downplay or twist the situation. This was my space, my sanctuary, and I had the right to feel safe in it. I was prepared to defend that right, no matter what it took. "Please leave my room," I said, my voice steadier now, the words carrying a quiet, unshakable resolve despite the fear coursing through me. I knew I had to stay strong, even though I had no intention of allowing him to manipulate or take advantage of me, regardless of how much effort he might expend to minimize or distort the situation. This was my space, my sanctuary, and I was determined to protect that right, no matter what it took. "Please leave my room," I said, my voice steadier now, the words carrying a quiet, unshakable resolve despite the fear coursing through me. I knew I had to stay strong, even though my heart was pounding so loudly that I could feel it in my throat. This moment would not define me or compromise my sense of security. This was my space, my sanctuary, and I would not let it be tainted. The thought of the peaceful time I had just spent alone grounded me further. Not long before he knocked, I had taken a moment to reconnect with myself, finding comfort and joy in my own company. It had been a time of complete peace, a private experience of self. I felt my pulse accelerating as I stood firm in my position, unwilling to yield to any outside influences. This was my personal space, my sanctuary, and I was determined to protect its integrity. The recent period of solitude had imbued me with a sense of inner peace, discovery, and contentment. I had momentarily let go of the stresses of the day, fully relaxed in my own presence, feeling at one with myself. That moment had been exclusively for me, a sacred, untroubled space of solace and release. Now, here he was, intruding on that quiet joy, threatening to shatter the tranquility I had worked so hard to establish. I was unwilling to let anything disturb that feeling, unwilling to let anyone take away that sense of inner peace. I had reached a state of complete relaxation, a sense of clarity and certainty about myself. I was unwilling to let anyone disrupt this moment of peace. The man's expression conveyed a mix of frustration and disappointment as he stood there. I maintained my position, refusing to yield. I could see the confusion and anger in his eyes, but I remained undeterred. I had every right to feel the way I did. This was my body, my mind, my space, and my choice. I wasn't going to let anyone disrupt this moment. I had established a sense of safety for myself, and he continued to stand there, his expression a mix of frustration and disappointment. I maintained my position, refusing to yield. I could see the confusion in his eyes, perhaps even the beginnings of anger or frustration, but I didn't care. I had every right to feel the way I did. This was my body, my mind, my space, and my choice. I wasn't going to let anyone else define it, control it, or undermine it. As I said, "Please leave." I reiterated my voice, more insistent. I wanted him to know I was serious. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a boundary, a firm line he could not cross. Standing there, I could feel my own strength and inner resolve that had taken root and grown in this moment. I wouldn't allow his disappointment, his reaction, to overshadow the clarity and certainty. I made it clear that I was not in the mood, and I was firm in my decision to maintain my personal boundaries. I added, "This is my space, my sanctuary, and I need you to respect that." As the silence stretched between us, I saw him grappling with his emotions, struggling to accept that I wasn't going to bend. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, a small voice wondering if he was hurt, but I reminded myself that my well-being was paramount. I explained that I was not in the mood to discuss the matter and added firmly, "This is my space. My sanctuary. I need you to respect that." As the silence stretched between us, I saw him wrestling with his own emotions, struggling to accept that I wasn't going to bend. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, a small voice wondering if he was hurt, but I reminded myself that my well-being came first. I had to prioritize my sense of safety, my peace, and my boundaries. "I hope you understand," I added, softening my tone slightly. "It's just not the right time for me." He sighed, disappointment etched across his face, but I held firm. This moment, this experience, wasn't his to disrupt. I felt empowered in that moment, knowing that I had defended what mattered to me, that I had chosen my own feelings and comfort. Above all, as he finally began to turn away, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I knew that from that moment forward, I would always prioritize my sense of self, my own boundaries, and my inner peace above anyone else's expectations or desires. When I saw the disappointment in his eyes, it lingered like a weight in the air, tugging briefly at my emotions. For a moment, it almost felt as though I should feel guilty, as if I had done something to hurt him. Someone who had once been a trusted figure in my life. That look, that hint of sadness and frustration, stirred a familiar impulse to sympathize, to reach out and make things right. But as soon as that instinct arose, I knew I couldn't allow it to take hold. This situation was different. This was a boundary that couldn't be crossed, not even for him. I reminded myself firmly and clearly that I had every right to feel the way I did. This wasn't about his disappointment, it was about my autonomy, my personal space, and my right to control what happened within it. My body was mine, my choices were mine, and no one had the right to dictate what I should feel or what I should want. He could be disappointed, he could be frustrated, or even angry, but I would not allow his reaction to undermine the sense of peace and self. I had every right to feel the way I did. This wasn't about his disappointment, it was about my autonomy, my personal space, and my right to control what happened within it. My body was mine, my choices were mine, and no one had the right to dictate what I should feel or what I should want. He could be disappointed, he could be frustrated, or even angry, but I would not allow his reaction to undermine the sense of peace and respect I had just fought to establish. As he stood there, the disappointment etched on his face, giving way to a mix of confusion and frustration. It became even clearer to me that this moment wasn't about him, it was about me. In that moment, I made a deliberate decision to place my needs, my feelings, and my boundaries above any expectations he might have held. I had no obligation to meet his needs or fulfill his unspoken wishes, and I wouldn't allow myself to feel pressured or responsible for his emotions. "I'm not in the mood," I stated, the words ringing with a quiet but resolute strength. I felt every syllable anchoring me in my choice, reinforcing the wall I was building to protect my inner peace. I wanted him to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was not responsible for his emotions or his well-being. I was not an object, not something he could claim or control at will. I was a person, and this was my space, my sanctuary. I reminded myself that this was a place where I should feel safe, respected, and at ease. In that moment, I needed him to respect that sanctuary just as much as I did. The room fell into a heavy silence, my words settling between us as he appeared to be grappling with my words, his expressions momentarily shifting from disbelief to frustration. I observed him, and a small part of me felt a hint of sympathy for his difficulty. However, I swiftly reminded myself of the importance of prioritizing myself and safeguarding my well-being. I reminded myself that empathy and sympathy were not the priority at this time, self-preservation and self-advocacy were. It was essential to prioritize my own well-being and boundaries during this period. I maintained unwavering composure, refusing to let my determination waver. I had the right to decline, to defend my personal space, and to protect my emotions and aspirations. This wasn't just about maintaining physical distance. It was about asserting my prerogative to determine who was allowed within that space and preserving the inner tranquility I had diligently cultivated. I sincerely hope you comprehend the significance of this decision. I added a gentle inflection to my voice, emphasizing I maintained my composure, determined not to yield to his attempts to influence my decision. This wasn't just about maintaining personal boundaries. It was about asserting my right to determine who was welcome in my space and safeguarding the inner peace I had diligently cultivated. I chose to emphasize the finality of my decision, ensuring he understood that the timing wasn't conducive to further dialogue. I observed him absorbing my words, his face reflecting a complex array of emotions, including disappointment, frustration, and perhaps a hint of wounded pride. His sigh conveyed unspoken thoughts, yet I remained unwavering in my position. I wasn't going to yield to the unspoken pressure to accommodate his feelings. I felt a sense of pride, which I hadn't anticipated. I was proud of myself for standing up for what I knew was right for me, for asserting my own needs and refusing to be swayed by someone else's expectations. I could feel the empowerment surging within me, a quiet but fierce strength that reminded me I could trust myself, that I could prioritize my own comfort, my own choices above all else. I recognized that this decision represented a significant turning point in my life, and I was committed to protecting my sense of self and personal space from external influences. This decision was a testament to my fierce and empowering commitment to myself, and it reinforced my belief in the importance of self-care and the value of personal well-being. In that decisive moment, I recognized that this decision represented a significant turning point in my life. I was determined to protect my sense of self and maintain the autonomy to make my own decisions regarding my body. This commitment was a source of personal empowerment, and it reinforced my belief in the importance of self-respect and the value of personal boundaries. As we reach the conclusion of this narrative, we are left with profound reflections on the subjects of personal boundaries, self-discovery, and the courage to advocate for oneself. What insights did you gain from this experience? Please share your reflections on one takeaway you will apply to your life in the comments section below. If you found this video helpful, we kindly request that you express your appreciation by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Your engagement is essential in supporting us as we continue to bring impactful stories to life. Thank you for watching.